Alright, let's dive into this absolute hornet's nest of a story. On one side of the ring, we have Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a name that probably rings a bell. He's the nephew of a president, he's the son of an attorney general, and now he's the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services. For years, Kennedy has been a very, very loud voice questioning vaccine safety and efficacy. He's built a massive following as a maverick speaking truth to power, especially against pharma. And on the other side, wearing the white coats, we have the American Academy of Pediatrics, the AAP. Think of them as the official fan club for children's health. They represent over 67,000 pediatricians. When your kid gets sick and you rush to the doctor, that doctor is very likely an AAP member. They are, essentially, the establishment Kennedy has railed against. It's a clash of titans. A populist political figure wielding massive governmental power versus an entrenched medical institution guiding pediatric care for generations. Kennedy frames himself as David against a Goliath corrupted by corporate money. This sets the stage for a showdown that seemed inevitable once Kennedy was confirmed. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of what they're actually fighting about. The conflict exploded into public view over something that sounds incredibly mundane: an immunization schedule. This isn't about whether your kid gets their shots in the right arm or the left, it's about whether they should get a COVID-19 vaccine at all. In an unprecedented move, the American Academy of Pediatrics decided to break away from the federal government's official stance. They advised all children between 6 and 23 months should receive a COVID-19 shot. They also recommended it for older children considered at high risk. They say the data shows benefits in preventing severe illness, hospitalization, and long-term complications. This directly clashes with Secretary Kennedy's position. He unilaterally struck the COVID-19 vaccine from the list of recommended immunizations for healthy children and healthy pregnant women. He argues healthy kids face very low risk of severe COVID-19, so he says the rare potential vaccine risks aren't justified and vaccination should be a personal choice between a parent and their doctor, not a blanket recommendation from a government agency or medical body. For parents, this creates confusion and stress. This is where the story gets spicy. Kennedy didn't just disagree with the AAP on the science, he went for the jugular. He accused the entire organization of corruption. He flat out accused the American Academy of Pediatrics of engaging in a pay-to-play scheme to promote commercial ambitions of AAP's big pharma benefactors. That is the political equivalent of flipping over the monopoly board and accusing grandma of cheating. To back up this explosive claim, Kennedy pointed to the AAP's donor list. He specifically cited donations from Pfizer and Moderna, the two giants behind the most common mRNA COVID vaccines. He argued that these pharmaceutical companies, along with others, contribute to the AAP's Friends of Children Fund, a program designed to support projects promoting children's health. In Kennedy's narrative, these aren't just charitable donations, they are strategic investments. Kennedy's accusation is designed to undermine the very credibility of the AAP. By framing their recommendations as a product of financial influence rather than scientific deliberation, he suggests that pediatricians are not acting in the best interests of children, but in the best interests of their corporate sponsors. This narrative resonates strongly with people who are already skeptical of the pharmaceutical industry, an industry that, let's be honest, has given us plenty of reasons to be skeptical over the years. This pay-to-play accusation transforms a scientific debate into a morality play. So, Kennedy threw down the gauntlet claiming the AAP is in the pocket of Big Pharma. Let's actually look at their books because the reality of their funding is, like most things in life, a bit more complicated than a tweet. The AAP is a large nonprofit and it gets its money from a variety of sources. And yes, as Kennedy pointed out, a portion of that funding does come from pharmaceutical companies. This isn't a secret. The AAP discloses its corporate relationships, including those with vaccine manufacturers like Pfizer, Moderna, and others. But, and this is a pretty big but, that's not the whole story. A far more significant source of funding for the AAP comes from the US government itself. According to their own disclosures, the AAP received a substantial amount in federal grants. In the 2023 fiscal year alone, the organization received nearly $35 million in government grants. That's a hefty chunk of change, and it dwarfs the contributions from any single pharmaceutical company. This fact complicates Kennedy's narrative because if the AAP is beholden to its donors, then its biggest donor is the very government that Kennedy now helps lead. It's a bit like complaining that your dog only listens to your spouse, while forgetting you're the one who buys all the dog food. So, what is all this government money used for? Well, according to the grant documentation, it's for a wide range of public health initiatives. Some of the money is explicitly used to advance childhood vaccination programs in the United States and internationally. Other funds are designated for combating what the government deems medical misinformation and disinformation online, a mission that, ironically, would often put the AAP in direct opposition to figures like Kennedy himself. Naturally, the American Academy of Pediatrics and its allies didn't just sit back, they fought back. They filed a lawsuit. This wasn't just the AAP going it alone, they teamed up with other major health organizations, forming a united front of the medical establishment against the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Their lawsuit alleges that when Secretary Kennedy removed the COVID vaccine from the recommended list for healthy children and pregnant women, he broke federal law. This moves the battle from the court of public opinion directly into an actual court of law. The core of their legal argument is that Kennedy's decision was arbitrary and capricious. That's a specific legal term, and it's a big deal. They contend that federal law dictates a specific process for making these kinds of changes, and they accuse Kennedy of completely ignoring it. The lawsuit argues that you can't just wake up one morning and decide to alter national health policy because you feel like it. There are supposed to be procedures, consultations with expert panels, and a review of the scientific evidence. The medical groups are essentially telling the court, this isn't just about whether we agree with his decision, it's about the fact that he made it illegally without following the established rules of the game. This legal challenge represents a dramatic escalation. It's highly unusual for a coalition of the nation's top medical groups to sue a sitting HHS secretary. For them, this isn't just a policy disagreement, it's an existential threat to the process of evidence-based public health policymaking. They believe that allowing a political appointee to unilaterally override the recommendations of scientific advisory committees sets a dangerous precedent. They are asking the judicial branch to step in and force the executive branch to follow its own rules, a classic check and balance of power playing out in the high-stakes arena of public health. So, how did Secretary Kennedy actually make this change? The lawsuit from the medical groups hinges on the process, or rather, the lack thereof. Normally, changing the national vaccination schedule is a bureaucratic, multi-step, and frankly quite boring process. It involves a group you've probably never heard of called the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, ACIP. This is a panel of independent medical and public health experts who meet, review all the available data, debate, and then vote on recommendations, which they then pass on to the CDC and HHS. This system is designed to be a buffer. It keeps the process insulated from the day-to-day whims of politics. The whole point of having a committee like ACIP is to ensure that vaccine recommendations are based on a thorough scientific review, not on who won the last election. But in this case, that system was apparently put on mute. Experts have pointed out that it is extraordinary for a health secretary to remove a vaccine from the schedule without first going through that formal consultation process, and without asking for the advice of the ACIP. Kennedy essentially skipped the line, bypassing the very experts whose job it is to provide him with guidance. Instead of waiting for an ACIP recommendation, Kennedy announced the change himself. His justification is that the existing recommendations were not reflective of the current science as he sees it, and that swift action was needed to correct what he viewed as a flawed policy. To his supporters, Kennedy is a decisive leader, unafraid to challenge a broken system and make the tough calls that the entrenched bureaucracy won't. But to his critics, including the AAP and other medical professionals, his actions are a reckless and dangerous abuse of power. So here we are, stuck in the middle of a massive tug-of-war. On one side, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the health secretary. He says the AAP's guidelines are corrupt. He claims they're influenced by pharmaceutical money. He's championing parental choice. He's promoting skepticism of institutions. He tells parents, don't trust experts tied to big pharma. You know what's best for your child. On the other side, the American Academy of Pediatrics and the medical community. They say recommendations come from rigorous collective scientific review. This matters because it creates confusion for parents. When the top health official is at war with top pediatricians, who do you trust? Parents are forced to act like amateur epidemiologists, sorting through conflicting claims, hearing accusations of corruption, sifting dense scientific data. That uncertainty can cause anxiety, it can breed distrust, and it can lead to choices that affect a child's health. The fight trickles down to pediatrician offices and to conversations at kitchen tables. This conflict is bigger than one vaccine. It's about who we trust to make decisions on public health. Scientific and medical institutions, despite flaws and financial ties, or populist leaders claiming to stand against a corrupt establishment. The outcome, in courts and public opinion, will have lasting implications. It will set precedent for how future health policy is made, for how much authority a political appointee can override scientific consensus, and for how much faith the public has left in institutions. That's why everyone is talking about it. The outcome affects us all.